Many Japanese women return from trips to Hawaii with similar stories to share with their friends. They experienced a romantic encounter there. Unfortunately, the person they connected with quickly lost contact and disappeared. The central figure in these stories points to the same name, Daisuke Yuga. Daisuke Yuga is someone with a wealth of romantic experiences, often treating relationships casually. At this moment, he is trying to break free from a new girlfriend. He falsely claims that his identity has been exposed and that he is an undercover spy, and before she can react, he jumps onto a passing jet ski and speeds away. The reason he meets so many women is that he works part-time as a tour guide in Hawaii. With his handsome appearance and witty conversation, he can quickly attract the interest of the opposite sex. But beyond this, Daisuke has a serious purpose. His true reason for coming to Hawaii is to conduct astronomical research, hoping to gain recognition from NASA by publishing papers. At that time, he was unaware that his life was about to take a turn. The next morning, after working all night at the mountaintop, Daisuke was preparing to return when his vehicle unexpectedly broke down and wouldn't start. He had no choice but to head to a nearby restaurant and wait for a tow truck. Shortly after sitting down, a reflection suddenly caught his eye. He looked up to see a stunning woman cutting waffles in the sunlight, her movements slightly clumsy yet exuding a kind of innocent charm. That scene stirred something in Daisuke, as if he had seen an angel descend. Despite his wealth of romantic experience, he felt a bit shy this time and didn't approach her. That night, Daisuke was still immersed in that fleeting glimpse. His friends noticed that he had clearly fallen for that woman at the restaurant. Daisuke didn't deny it, but merely said that she might be a local, making it inconvenient for him to casually strike up a conversation. The reason he usually only developed brief relationships with tourists was that they would leave quickly, and he wouldn't have to bear any responsibility. During their conversation, Daisuke suddenly perked up. He discovered from his observational data that he might have found a new star. His colleagues were also very excited upon hearing this, believing that this discovery could create a stir in the academic community. However, his friends' thoughts were still lingering on the woman in the restaurant. Daisuke appeared slightly displeased, emphasizing that romantic feelings would only interfere with his research progress. The next morning, Daisuke found himself unable to resist returning to that restaurant. The woman was still sitting in the same spot, continuing to fiddle with her waffles, trying to construct a small house out of them, but struggling to secure the door. Daisuke felt that the opportunity had come, so he picked up a toothpick and walked over to her, gently inserting it, which stabilized the waffle door. This clever move surprised her and piqued her interest in Daisuke, prompting her to introduce herself as Rue. Daisuke knew it was not wise to be too impatient, so after a brief conversation, he stood up to take his leave. However, Rue called him back and invited him to sit down and chat. This was exactly what Daisuke wanted, and the two began to converse. Daisuke talked about his focus on astronomy and why he chose Hawaii, as it has some of the world's top observatories. Rue listened intently and gradually became curious about astronomy. Daisuke then shared stories about constellations, and his humorous words made her chuckle, subtly closing the distance between them. As breakfast time ended, Rue still felt unsatisfied, but she looked at her watch and indicated that she had to leave because it was her father's birthday. She and Daisuke agreed to meet again at the restaurant the next day, and she mentioned that she might be a bit late because she had an art class during the day. Daisuke didn't mind the details and turned to leave after saying goodbye. As he reached his car, he couldn't help but excitedly wave his arms, feeling love for the first time. Little did he know, Rue was also joyfully bouncing on the other side. Daisuke was the first person she felt such a connection with. However, as both were immersed in their own joy, the car parked in between suddenly drove away, making the atmosphere a bit awkward. That night, Daisuke was writing a paper on his computer, but Rue's figure kept appearing in his mind. He wished time would pass faster so he could see her again immediately. Finally, the next day arrived, and he eagerly walked into the restaurant. Just as he warmly greeted Rue and prepared to continue their conversation from yesterday, Rue showed a confused and even guarded expression, bluntly stating that she did not recognize him and even suspected he was a suspicious person. Seeing this, the owner quickly pulled Daisuke aside and explained in a low voice. Rue's situation was quite special. A year ago today, while driving to the mountains to pick pineapples with her father, they had an accident while trying to avoid a calf that suddenly dashed onto the road. Her father only suffered a fracture and recovered after resting, but Rue sustained a brain injury, causing her memory to remain stuck on the day of the accident. Since then, she wakes up every day forgetting what happened the day before, and her life has been fixed in the same pattern. Daisuke found it hard to believe that in such an information-rich era, Rue could be completely unaware. The owner shook her head and explained that Rue's art class had long been taken over by someone else. Her father was very protective of her, and the people around her cooperated to maintain this routine. At that moment, Rue had returned home. Her father, Kinta, was already waiting there, holding a pineapple, a gift from a client, saying they didn't need to go to the mountains to pick one this year. He then took Rue to the studio and suggested she paint a picture on the blank wall as a birthday gift for her father. Rue happily agreed and began to think seriously about it, unaware of the sadness that her father could hardly conceal on his face. Kinta returned home and saw his youngest son Shintaro working out while preparing dinner, but he didn't say much. He took out a CD that recorded news from a year ago. This was one of the ways he maintained his daughter's awareness. Once Rue was done with her tasks, Kinta played the CD and discussed the news content with her. Shintaro found it boring and deliberately revealed what was going to be played next, making Rue surprised and think her brother had precognitive abilities. After she left the room, Kinta couldn't help but grab a slipper to discipline his son, sternly warning him that he must cooperate with the performance. At night, Kinta forced a smile as he celebrated his 300th same-day birthday. Rue once again told that repeatedly heard joke, and Shintaro laughed along. Then, Kinta changed into his costume for the performance as usual, making Rue and her brother laugh heartily. Once Rue went back to her room to rest, Kinta and Shintaro's real work began, changing the newspapers, adjusting the pineapple in the fridge, restoring the amount of toiletries, resetting Rue's phone date back to a year ago, and repainting the walls white, all just to continue this daily routine tomorrow. Daisuke, who learned all of this, felt complicated. A friend half-jokingly said that this might be good for Daisuke since Rue would forget everything every day, relieving him of responsibility. But Daisuke didn't think so. This time, he was serious. The next day, Daisuke went to the restaurant again. The owner stopped him, hoping he wouldn't disturb Rue anymore. Daisuke refused to give up and still picked up a toothpick to help secure the Waffle House door, but Rue reacted negatively, scolding him for touching her food. After failing to flirt, Daisuke had to come back the next day. This time, he pretended to seek advice on painting, bringing his own artwork for Rue to critique, but he was still met with a cold rejection. So, Daisuke changed his approach. He sat in the restaurant and pretended to cry, which indeed caught Rue's attention. He then claimed he couldn't understand the English menu and asked Rue for help. This time, Rue invited him to share a table. After the meal, Daisuke walked Rue to the parking lot, politely said goodbye, and prepared to leave, but Rue looked slightly disappointed, thinking he would ask for her contact information. Daisuke then realized and wanted to remedy the situation, but Rue had already driven away. The restaurant owner witnessed the whole thing and felt she should inform Kinta. Daisuke then drove to Rue's house, where he encountered a serious-looking Kinta. Kinta pulled him aside and sternly warned him to stay away from Rue. Shintaro also rushed over, wanting to take action, but Daisuke easily subdued him. Daisuke seriously stated that he was sincere about Rue. However, Kinta remained unmoved, only requesting that he not go to the restaurant anymore, because once Rue sensed the truth, she would fall into daily anguish. Daisuke was caught in hesitation by these words. He returned to the travel agency restlessly, neglecting to attend to the 3 new female tourists. The boss asked with concern, and Daisuke said distressedly, "What should I do if I like a girl, but her father opposes us being together?" The boss laughed and said, "Dating is a matter between 2 people. Why care too much about her father's opinion?" This statement awakened Daisuke, and he decided not to go to the restaurant, but to wait on the road that Rue passed every day. He pretended his car broke down, successfully making Rue stop. Then he feigned an electric shock, startling Rue, but received a playful smile in return. Next, he had a friend pretend to rob him, but unexpectedly, Rue was a member of the community watch and grabbed a baseball bat to chase after him. After the farce ended, Kinta appeared driving, expressionless, and told Daisuke to come home with him. Daisuke thought he was going to be driven away again, but found Rue humming a song while painting the walls. Kinta quietly said that this was Rue's favorite song, and she would hum it every time Daisuke came back, indicating she was in a good mood. He didn't care about Daisuke's motives for approaching Rue. He just hoped his daughter could be happy. But Daisuke bluntly stated that such concealment could not last long. When Rue grew old, the truth would eventually be revealed. Kinta fell silent. He also knew this was not a long-term solution. The next morning, Daisuke came to find Rue again. After chatting for a few moments, Rue suddenly saw the police checking her car and rushed out to explain that the inspection was clearly next year. She grabbed a newspaper, pointed to the date saying it was 2016, but when she flipped it over, it was clearly printed with 2017. Rue was stunned and frantically opened the mailbox, discovering that all the newspapers were from the same day. She finally realized that she had been living in a lie. Rue rushed home, angrily honking the horn. Kenta understood that everything could no longer be concealed and could only take her inside and confess everything. Rue's perception collapsed in an instant. She ran to the seaside, screaming and crying, angry at her father's deception and grieving for her own incompleteness. Kenta took out the diagnostic records and photos from the hospital bed from that year. Rue touched the scar on her head, but still refused to believe it, insisting on hearing the doctor say it himself. Kenta had no choice but to take her and others to the sanatorium. After the doctor examined her, he confirmed that Rue's hippocampus was damaged, and her short-term memory could not be converted into long-term memory during sleep, but her emotional functions were intact. After returning home from the sanatorium, Rue was downcast and just wanted to be alone in peace. Before going upstairs, she suddenly turned back to Daisuke and said, "Tomorrow we can try lilies. They are my favorite flowers." This conversation made Kenta realize that his daughter had already fallen for Daisuke. He invited Daisuke inside and asked him when he planned to leave Hawaii. Daisuke admitted that once his thesis was approved, he would be heading to work at NASA. He then said that Rue's real pain was not the illness, but the deception. He had a new method that might be better than always acting. The next day, Daisuke brought a bouquet of lilies to Rue's home, lying that it was sent by a suitor. Then, he handed Rue a disc. Kenta also encouraged his daughter to watch. In the video, Daisuke slowly recounted the world events Rue had missed over the past year, explained the reason for her amnesia, and reenacted their first meeting with friends. The restaurant owner also brought out a photo with Rue's mother, promising to take care of her. After watching, Rue quietly shed tears, sitting on the beach for a long time before gradually calming down. From then on, the first thing Rue did every morning was to watch the video to learn about what happened yesterday. She also began to understand her feelings for Daisuke. One evening, as they sat side by side under the sunset, Rue softly said, "If I had met Daisuke before the incident, I wouldn't have to fall in love with him again every day." Daisuke smiled and replied, "In that case, Rue might find him boring." Rue laughed and got up to chase and play with him. From that day on, Rue began to actively record videos, documenting the little moments in her life. Daisuke told her that his thesis was about to be published. Rue didn't quite understand what that meant and simply asked him if he truly liked her. Daisuke seriously said, he falls in love with the strange yet familiar Rue every day. After saying that, he gently kissed her. Later, Daisuke took Rue to the observatory for the first time, and Rue thought he had ulterior motives. Daisuke joked, this is already their 23rd kiss. Rue, however, replied seriously, but today is the first time I met Daisuke. Daisuke didn't press further and instead took her to his favorite stargazing spot on the mountain. The sky was filled with stars, and Rue was mesmerized. Daisuke pointed to the starry sky and explained the constellations to her. Rue emotionally said, if a shooting star appears in the next minute, she will grant Daisuke a wish. As soon as she finished speaking, a shooting star streaked across the sky, and Daisuke kissed her and formally proposed. Rue agreed without hesitation. But the next morning, Rue forgot everything again. She screamed and pushed Daisuke away, thinking he was a bad person, and hit him with a wooden stick. Daisuke hurriedly explained, and she reluctantly returned home. Kenta, upon learning of this, smiled wryly and asked Daisuke if he still planned to go to America. Daisuke was torn. He didn't know that Rue had heard everything outside the door and had made a decision in her heart. The next day, Rue came to find Daisuke holding a stack of diaries. Since watching the video for the first time, she had started writing in her diary every day because the video was too long, and the diary could help her recover her memories faster. But this time, she was there to say goodbye. She forced a smile and said that she would be a burden to him, so it was better to part ways. Daisuke was stunned, silent for a long time, and finally burned all the pages in the diary related to him with her, deleting their photos from his phone one by one. Each deletion felt like erasing a piece of time that had truly existed. After the last photo was deleted, Daisuke stood up to leave, holding back tears. But Rue called out to him from behind, wanting to feel their first kiss one last time before completely forgetting. In the heavy rain, the two shared a long kiss. Afterward, Daisuke left sadly. Not long after, Daisuke received an invitation from NASA, but couldn't feel happy at all. Before leaving, he ran into Rue, who had completely forgotten him. At the airport farewell, Kinta also arrived, telling him that Rue had voluntarily moved into a nursing home. Daisuke felt heartbroken but could only say goodbye. Before the plane took off, Daisuke opened his computer, intending to email NASA, but accidentally saw a photo of the two of them on the hard drive. In an instant, all the memories flooded back. He was in tears and suddenly got up, rushing off the plane straight to the nursing home. There, Rue was teaching someone to paint. Daisuke thought Rue had forgotten him, but she led him into a studio with a complicated expression. The entire wall and room were filled with portraits of Daisuke. Rue said she didn't remember who he was, but dreamed of his face every night. Daisuke told her everything, seriously saying, without her, he wouldn't be happy anywhere. They reintroduced themselves as if they were meeting for the first time. Rue once again experienced the feeling of their first kiss. In the morning, Rue woke up, and the robot by her bed started playing the video. This time, their wedding appeared on the screen. She walked up to the rooftop and saw Daisuke waiting there with a little girl, who was their daughter. Rue's eyes filled with tears, feeling that everything was beautifully unreal. And the familiar starry sky above quietly reminded her, all of this is real.